motivates you in life? The most joy-filled, passionate people I know have something that compels them in life, that motivates them. As a Christ follower, for me, what compels and motivates me is to pursue Him, to love God with all of my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love my neighbor as myself. Another thing that compels me comes right out of the lips of Jesus. That's recorded for us in Luke 19:10, when Jesus said that the Son of Man came to seek and to save those who are lost. I call that Jesus' compelling why. Now that phrase, a compelling why, comes from a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek, who wrote a book and delivered a TED Talk that's phenomenal that talks about our compelling why. And in that presentation, he basically draws 3 concentric circles. The most outside circle is what we do. And then the next circle is how we do it. And the next circle is why we do it. And his presentation is basically focused on that why. And he basically is saying to us that our why compels us. Well, as Christ followers and as linchpin leaders, we've already talked in this series about the things that compel us. Our compelling why really is that people would come into a relationship with Jesus Christ. And in our last segment together, we talked a little bit about the how. We said that we want to be a leadership discerning community together. That's who we want to be. I want to talk about a second aspect of that how for just a moment. And as we talk about it, there are 2 key players in all this. There's, first of all, the leaders, and then there's the model. First, the leaders. Now, every church has them, and I hope you have a boatload of them. There are leaders who serve in different ministries within the life of the church. But for our discussion today, we're going to narrow the focus of leadership to just the senior pastor and you, the governing body. Again, we understand that there's a whole slew of other leaders in the life of a church, but for today, let's just narrow it down to those 2. And then we're going to talk about the model. I have to tell you that confusion around the model causes such dysfunction and heartache in the lives of leadership teams and in a leadership boardroom. Because the confusion comes in, who is responsible for what? Who does what? And when do they do it? So that's what we're going to pull apart in this segment, is to understand the model that we're operating under and therefore what part we are to play. A lot of churches use what I call the loan officer model of board governance. Now, I've never heard anybody else talk about this. I quite frankly made it up. Let me tell you what I mean by it. You know, when you think of a loan officer, what do? They sit behind a desk and they basically give thumbs up or thumbs down to you to get a car loan or to get a loan for a house or whatever it might be. In the same way, so many boards, so many governing bodies, so many groups of elders come together and they basically act like that loan officer. Every month or every quarter, the pastor comes in and they present different ideas to the board and they say, this is what I'd love to do. This is a person I'd love to hire, or this is a ministry I'd like to start, or maybe we'd love to start a second or third service, something along those lines. And then what happens is that the governing body, the board, sits there and they look over reports just like a loan officer would. They look over financial reports, and at the end of the day, they either give a thumbs up or thumbs down to that idea. This much is sure, nothing happens until that governing board gives their thumbs up or thumbs down to whatever idea it is. Now, over the last 10 years, there's a different governing model that's come on the scene. It's called the Carver governing model. Author John Kaiser, in his book, Winning on Purpose, took the Carver governance model and he applied it to the life of a local church. And in that book, he uses this wonderful analogy of a soccer field. Now, we all understand a soccer field. There's a boundary, so there's an inbounds and an out of bounds. There are a couple of goals, and the idea, the goal is to get the ball into the goal. Now, that's our goal. There's always somewhere around a scoreboard that helps us understand how we're doing. Are we scoring goals and who's winning and who's not, that kind of thing. We all get that. Well, let's apply that now, the governance model, as it relates to this soccer field, to these 2 people, the senior pastor and the governing body, you, the linchpin leaders. Here's how it plays out. What happens is that the governing body and the pastor come together and they discern together what the boundaries are. They call those boundary principles. So what are the things that the pastor is allowed to do, and what are the things that the pastor is not allowed to do? We'll come back to that in just a second. The other thing they do is they discern together what the goals are going to be. what goals are we going to shoot after, or are we going to go for as a church? So for instance, let's talk about the boundary principles for a moment. A boundary principle could be, depending on your budget, that a senior pastor is allowed to spend $500 or $5,000 or $50,000, again, depending on your budget, without board approval, as long as that amount is already written into the approved budget that the church has. If that money is already written into the budget, then the pastor's allowed to spend that money without any board approval. That could be a boundary principle. Another boundary principle could be that the pastor is required to come to the governing body and let them know if they are hiring or firing someone. Just keeping them up to speed about that. Again, not getting their permission to do that, but just keeping them communicated about that so that the governing body, the individuals, that you as a linchpin leader are not broadsided by something that you didn't know about. Let's talk about the goals now that you might discern together. You might discern that you would love to see 50 people come into a relationship with Jesus Christ in the next year. That's an awesome goal to discern together. You might discern together that you want to give 15% more to missions or to church planting this coming year than you did this past year. You might discern together that you'd love to see 20% more people actively engaged in serving your community than what you've seen in the year prior. Those are all very understandable and great goals to go after. Once that goal has been set, then it is the pastor's privilege to run whatever play to unleash the congregation in ways that they sense is best to accomplish that goal. As far as accountability is concerned, as long as the pastor stays within the boundaries that the board and the pastor have agreed upon beforehand, and the pastor is free to run whatever play to see ministry happen in whatever way they sense is best. Now, sure, they can talk to the board about their input. They can get input from the board, of course. But at the end of the day, the board has empowered the pastor to unleash the congregation in ways that will help them accomplish that goal. And then at the end of the year, they can all celebrate together the great work that God has done in the church. For the last 6 years, I've been blessed to serve with a team that's working under this governance model called the Carver Governance Model. And often what we say about ourselves, this is kind of how we define ourselves. We are a leadership discernment community who use aspects of the Carver Governance Model to keep us mission focused and in alignment. That's how we consider ourselves. So what we do is we want to make sure that we're discerning God's will together, absolutely, and we use aspects of the governance model to help us accomplish our mission. And because of that, there's great unity on our team, there's great understanding on our team, there's not dysfunction, it's just an awesome way to operate. And I commend it to you, so I would encourage you, do the hard work to become a leadership discernment community that uses a model, agree together on a model that you'll use to accomplish the great work of ministry that God has called you to do as linchpin leaders.